Hey you guys, Martika here with Martika J Makes, and welcome back to my channel and welcome to my first sew along. You guys, we are going to be sewing McCall's 8241, and that is this one right here. It has become one of my favorites. Very, very comfortable to wear, and I get a lot of wear out of this poncho shirt, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to be doing view B. I have done this view before, so I want another one. So that is the one we're going to be doing. There are only 4 pieces to this pattern, and I will be sharing it with you shortly. However, if you decide to do view A or view C by following my instructions for doing view B, that is totally fine. This is one of the easiest patterns that you will ever sew. So it is definitely beginner friendly, and all you need is your thread and your fabric. There are no other notions needed for this. Unless you are making view C, you of course need the yarn. So let me show you what fabric I am using in this. And this, you know, I love a great bargain. I'm going to be using this amazing knit fabric that I got from Walmart. It was 2 yards for $4, you guys. And I recently picked this up. So the choices, I tell you, were very, very slim to none almost. And you can see that. But I was able to snag actually a couple of bundles that I really liked, and this was one of them. So I'm going to put that up close so that you can see how pretty. This is like a two-toned blue knit. So this is what I'm using, and you only need, depending on which one you are making, you only really need about 2 yards of fabric for this. The most amount in this particular pattern that someone would need would be for view C, and that would be like for 2 5/8, and that's for the extra, extra large. I am cutting the small. I cut a medium in this before, but I am cutting a small. You actually do need for view B 2 1/4 yard, but I know that I can get what I need out of these 2 yards of fabric. So I'm going to get this fabric washed up, get it dried, and let's go ahead and get started making McCall's 8241. So let's go over the pattern pieces you're going to need to make your top. First of all, you're going to need pattern piece number 1, which is the front. And of course, this is a pretty big piece, and you are going to need to cut this on the fold. And just be sure to cut your notches and any other markings that you need to make. Don't leave that out because you're going to need them. And then you're going to need pattern piece number 2, which is the back. Same thing, you're going to cut it on the fold. You're also going to need pattern piece number 3, which is your collar. And last but not least, you are going to need pattern piece number 4, which is the sleeve band. Now on this piece, you do have a fold line right in the center. Now you can mark that, and if you are a beginner, I would strongly advise you to, but just know that this piece will be folded in half, so make sure your cutting is precise, especially in these little corners here. And you can cut this. I like to cut my knits out with a rotary cutter, but you can use your scissors or you can use a rotary cutter. But like I said before, just make sure you mark you cut all of your notches, you do all of your markings everywhere there is on the pattern. Be sure to check it because you're going to need that. Now I do have all of my pieces cut out, and I want to show you something here. On the back piece, on piece number 2, which is the back, because of the fact that they look so much alike, number 1 and number 2, you want to take like a chalk or a marking pen, something that is definitely going to wash out, and mark your back. I just took my my chalk pen and I just put just a little line there, and like I said before, this will wash out, so be sure to use something washable. But when you put them together, you will not be able to tell the front from the back. So Make sure you mark your back so that once you get your whole piece together, you can put your tag or whatever you want to put in the back there. So let's get going. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to stitch our shoulders together, and we're also going to stitch between the small and large circles that we made. So first we have to pin our pieces together. Now I'm going to use pins for the sake of the video, but if you have these clips, a lot of times I like to use these clips with my knits, but for right now I'm just going to use my pins. So we're going to take this back piece, you're going to have right sides facing. So the way that I know this is the wrong side is because that yellow mark there, but my other side is also, my right side is a really pretty softer feel. So I apologize that you can't see just everything from this part, but I will try to get in view of what you need to see. So we are going to put our pieces together. Find the neckline of your front piece. Make sure, like I said before, right sides facing. And if you have any notches to match up, which you should, we are going to pin those together. So here's a notch and here's a notch. And that is before you pin any of the neckline or anything together. This will give you basically your anchor of where you need to start to make sure that everything is pinned evenly. Now we're going to go over here and pin our neckline together, and I made a couple of snippets in my neckline due to the markings on the fabric, just so that I know that I'm getting those pieces good and even, so I have a little notch there too. And you put as many pins as you need to. Depending on the type of fabric that I'm working with, I may choose to just use a few pins, or if I'm getting like some curling, or if I have some slippery fabric that I'm using, I tend to use many more pins than probably the average person. But it's what I'm comfortable with. It's the way that I make sure that my garment is, you know, being sewn evenly, and you just do what works for you. There's no right or wrong way as far as how many pins you need. That is definitely one area where you can just be comfortable in doing what you need to do to make sure you get all of those stitches in nice and even. So we're going to continue to pin this sleeve. I'm going to go ahead and pin the end of my sleeve together. I'm not going to just go all the way down the sleeve itself, because I want to make sure that it's nice and even down there and those corners are together. And that way, if I have, you know, any loose areas in here, I can just adjust whatever needs to be adjusted. Usually with the knit, you just stretch it a little bit and pin it, but this is falling right in place. There, that is one side all pinned up. Now you do the other side the same, the other shoulder the same. But then after you're done with that, there are two markings that you should have made, and that there's it was a small dot and a larger dot. You're also going to sew, and we're going to take it all to the machine, but you're going to be sewing in here, so you want to match up these notches. You have a double notch there. Match that up and pin. Oh, it kind of got off there. Make sure it's all even after you pin. Sometimes it will, you can kind of stretch it out of place. All right. Now, when it's a notch where I need to stop at, usually I'll get like a color pen, like a red ball pen or whatever. But if I don't have it right at my hand's reach at the moment, I will take and I will pin right at that dot, and I'll push it all the way through, because this is a stopping point. So make sure, however you need to mark your stopping point, make sure that you mark it well so that you know that you're not going to go all the way down this seam. You're going to stop right there. The same with the beginning. I do the exact same thing so that I know that this dot here is my starting point. I'm just going to take that and I'm going to push that pin all the way through. Or like I said, you could use a color tip pin to show, you know, if you're using all the same color pins like I am. Now I'm going to take and I'm actually going to add a pin here. Sometimes these pins will slip, but if you're paying attention to your instructions and everything, you won't get off track. All right. So that side is done. Your shoulder is done. Go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. All right. So now that we have both sides pinned, this is one side, this is the other. Let's go ahead and take it to the machine. And what we are going to do, we are going to sew our shoulder seam together all the way down. And then, like I stated before, we're going to sew a partial of the side seam. We're going to start at our dot. We're going to stitch all the way to the end. And then we're going to back stitch there at the larger dot and stop there. So let's go ahead and get to the machine. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and sew our shoulder seam at 5/8 of an inch. And I usually like to use my walking foot if I have a really stretchy knit material that I need a little help guiding through. But I do know that I have a lot of beginners that's watching who may not have all of those type of components. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the regular foot on my sewing machine to show you that you can still get this done. So let's go ahead and sew our shoulder seam. So now that we have gotten our shoulder seam sewn, our side seam sewn, we are going to do some stay stitching. We're going to turn this right side out. So now your wrong sides are facing each other and you can see the right side on the outside. Normally when we stay stitch, we would do this before we attach the front to the back. But in this particular pattern, you're going to stay stitch afterwards. Now, also, normally when you stay stitch, especially a top at the neckline, you would start at one corner, go halfway in, and then start at the other corner and go halfway in. Not with this pattern. With this pattern, if you read through your instructions, you're going to start at your right corner when it's facing you. When you have this on, this is actually your left shoulder. I'm sorry, shoulder, not corner. You're going to start here. You're going to stay stitch all the way around the back, all the way across the other shoulder, all the way across the front and back to the right shoulder or left shoulder if you're wearing it. And that is what we're going to do now. We're going to stay stitch this at 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so your next step is actually going to be done at the machine. So we're going to stay right here. And this is stitching your collar. So you cut one collar piece on the fold. Now, I told you that I had 2 yards of fabric. Now, for the size that I'm cutting, it actually called for 2¼ yards worth of fabric. And I actually did need that to be able to cut this piece on the fold. So since I did not have enough, I basically just attached 2 pieces together. So if you're in a pinch like that, go ahead and do that. But if not, go ahead and have the amount that the pattern called for. So by attaching those 2 pieces together, I now have one whole collar piece. So we are going to we're going to turn this right sides facing, and we are going to stitch it at the center back, which is going to be stitched at 5/8 of an inch. So we're just going to put this together just like this, matching up our notches. If you need to pin, go ahead and pin. And I do like to still go ahead and pin, you know, even on small pieces, just to make sure that they stay together. So matching up your notches, there's another double notch back here. I'm going to go ahead and pin there. I personally don't need as many pins here, so I'm just going to do about 3, just enough to keep it together for me. Put one there towards the corner, and then I'm going to put one right here in the center. Personal preference. And we are going to go ahead and stitch at 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so now that we have our back piece of our collar sewn, we are going to form our collar and pin. So what you're going to do is still on the wrong side here. What you're going to do is you are going to flip this halfway over to the right side, okay? And remember, in yours, if you cut it on the fold, you will only have 1 seam line. Mine, I have 2. Okay, so once you fold this over, you're folding it over halfway. What you're going to do is you have notches. If you cut your notches out when you were cutting out your pattern piece, you have about 4 notches on both sides. So here's one. You're going to pin these together. Here's another one. Basically, you're going to have 2 on the front and 2 on the back. And then here are your other notches on the other side. You're going to pin these together just like you did the others. And the last one. And now we are going to attach our collar to our neckband on our shirt. Okay, now for me, I'm going to be honest, reading the next instruction on how to attach this collar to the neckline was a little bit confusing for me. So I just basically incorporated my own way of the way that I like to do necklines, and that is to have my garment on the right side facing, and then just attach my neckline. So basically I'm applying the raw edge. I'm putting it over it just like this, the way that you would do a sleeve. So I'm putting this over it. I'm going to start with the seam line here on the shoulder, and that is where I'm going to start and attach my seam line. So technically for this particular collar, you would only have one seam line. So we're going to attach it there and put a pin. And then you are simply going to find your notches around the neckline, and you're going to go ahead and attach your neckline to this collar. So there is a notch there, and you're going to attach it. Basically, I just remove the pin. I don't add another pin. I just remove the pin and attach all the layers together just like that. I'm going to find the other one and do the exact same thing. And because of this stay stitching, it's a little bit hard to find, but here it is right there. So you just attach it. And if you find that your neckline, if your collar seems a little small, this is knit, you just stretch it to where it needs to be and pin. So go ahead and continue to pin your neckline, and then we're going to take it to the sewing machine. Okay, so as you can see, I got my collar attached to my neckline. Got tons of pins in here because that's what I do. So we are going to go ahead and start sewing from one seam all the way around to the others, through the other seam and back to the seam where we started from. So you don't have to take a break and stop. You just keep going, and we are going to attach this collar at 5/8 of an inch. As we finish, we're just going to backstitch, and you are done attaching your collar. Now, per the instructions, what you would do is you would go back through and you would basically make another stitch line 1/4 of an inch away from this line towards the raw edge. So about right here, if you do not have a serger, go ahead and secure another stitch about 1/4 inch away from this stitching line towards the raw edge of the collar here, and then you're going to trim close to that second stitching that you're going to put here. I am going to finish this off with my serger, so I don't need to do that securing stitch because that finished edge that I'm going to do with my serger will secure this. So if you have a serger and you choose to serge your edge like I do, then go right ahead and do that now. But if you do not have a serger, or you could even secure it with like a zigzag stitch if you wanted to, if you have an overlocking stitch on your sewing machine, you can do it that way also. But those are just some options for you to be able to finish this off. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my serger, and we will come right back with the next step. So now I have completed attaching my collar. I have my top right side out, as you can see, and then on the inside I press the seam line upward going towards the collar all the way around. And I have also attached my label to the section that I marked as my back when we first started. So that way when you wear your garment, you'll know which one is the back, because like I said, as soon as you attach them, they both look exactly alike, and it's very hard to tell. So I have already done that. You can do the same. And now we are going to work on the sleeve band. So you have two pieces that you cut. This is your last piece. This is number 4. And this is the piece that have your very precise, I don't want to say inserts, but your cuts here that looks kind of like an arrow in a way. So you have those pieces cut. So now what you want to do is we are going to fold this piece in half. And it's going to be right sides facing. And you're going to fold it in half all the way down, of course. And make sure you even everything up really well. And you are going to pin. Make sure you match your notches up. There's one notch. We're going to start pinning at that point. And I also like to pin down my corners. We're going to pin all the way down. Okay, so now that we have gotten it all pinned, we are going to take it to our machine and we are going to sew all the way down, and you pivot at that point just a little bit to get that angle, and we're going to sew this at 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention is that, and you probably already know, you do have another piece to this. So be sure to pin your other piece the same way, because we're going to do both of these pieces the exact same way. So we're going to go ahead and sew this at 5/8 of an inch. Now, as we come to this little corner here, we're going to get right in the middle of it, and we are going to lift our presser foot and turn just slightly and go ahead and continue to sew. How do you know how, if you've turned enough? When the bottom half of this is straight along the lines and not at an angle as it was before when you were sewing the top part of it. Okay, we have completed that one. Do the same thing with the other piece, and we will begin on the next step. Okay, so we have completed sewing both of our sleeve bands, and now we are going to actually form them. And what we are going to do, these are on the wrong side facing us, so the right sides are together. But what we're going to do is kind of similar to what we did with the collar. And you are going to just take and just flip this inside out, but not pulling it all the way through. You're folding this over in half so that the raw edges meet up with each other. And the easier way to do this is, for one, to make sure that your seams are matching. The seams that you sewn together. Because once this is attached to the top itself, you will not do anything else with these sleeve bands. So you are completing them, the look of them and everything at this point. And you can see it formed at that point right there. Now, if you want to take and put this on your arm at this point, this is the raw edge is going to be your more of your top part, and then of course this folded edge is where your hand go through. So if you want to go and put your hand through like this and check the fit, make sure that it's not loose and falling down off of you, because at that point, if it is, you will want to turn this back inside out, and you will want to stitch that a little bit, take your, pinch it in, pin it, do whatever you need to do to make sure that you have not like a super snug fit, but a fit to where it's not sagging down very easily, because this is the fit that you want when you put your top on. Okay, so this fits fine, so I'm gonna continue to pin. And in this piece, there's not really, there's only one notch that I can actually find. And to be honest with you, I I can't even remember if that's a notch. It is a notch. I'm sorry. I just didn't do a very good job of cutting that one, and that's okay, because the main thing is that your sleeve band is pinned evenly all the way around. But you know, this just shows you sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Make sure you cut your notches out pretty good so that you can actually find both of them. Okay, I'm not gonna need as many pins for this because we are going to be turning around and pinning this to the armhole of the actual top itself. So this is basically just to hold it together. Okay, that's the first one. I'm going to actually go ahead and do the second one in case you need a recap. This is what you sewn. It is wrong side out. We are flipping it over just to where the raw edges meet. Get them good and even. Shake it out. Do whatever you need to do. Match up your seams. And pin. All right, so I wanted to show you I have already attached one of my sleeves, and as you can see, it is attached very well. So I'm going to show you how to do this with the other sleeve that I have not yet attached. So we're going to turn our top inside out. So make sure that the wrong side is facing you. Okay. Once I figure out which side I need to put this sleeve on, we'll get started. There we go. Okay, so this is the end of the shoulder seam the first seam that we sewed. And then you have here your side seam. Remember the seam where you sewed in between the two dots, okay? This makes the armhole right here. All right, so what we're going to do, as you know, this is all on the right side now, okay? Leave it that way. You've pinned your raw edges together. You are going to use those pins, so don't take those out. What you're going to do, you want right sides facing. So remember, this is the wrong side out facing you. You're going to drop your sleeve into this armhole. Okay, now this is just the easiest way that I personally have found to do this. So I wanted to show you the way that I do this. You want your seam to your sleeve band, you want it facing underneath your arm, okay? You want it to be lined up with this seam right here at the bottom, okay? So let's go ahead and stuff our sleeve band into the armhole to where they are right sides facing together. Okay, then try to get your armhole in there to where your sleeve band is already, try to get your sleeve band into this armhole to where that seam is already lined up as best you can. If you don't, just turn it. Be very careful of your pins. Okay. So now I've gotten that in there. So I'm going to take my end here and I'm just going to make sure that I get these lined up. I'm not pinning these just yet, okay? Because this is a little different the way that this is going to line up. So my seams are matching right here. I need to, where this is basically your 5/8 of an inch guide here, I'm going to take the end as it flows up. I'm going to take the end and start pinning it to my armhole. Okay, making sure all layers are evenly flat. Okay, make sure you have no bulges going on. If you need to stretch any of the pieces a little bit, go ahead and do so. Sometimes you have to do that with your knit fabrics. And then as I pin, I am going to make sure that everything is pretty much lining up, stretching where I need to stretch, pinning where I need to pin. Now this pin was already in the sleeve band. This is where you're going to take that out and then pin all of the layers together. So those pins kind of help to act as a guide for you. You're going to pin all the way around, adding as many pins as you need. But I'll be honest with you, you don't just need a ton because this armhole isn't that big. Now you're at your shoulder seam almost. There are no markings for the shoulder seam. So if you want to make sure that it's even, do like you did before. Make sure that your seam is even at the bottom. Just stretch. You have your armhole marked right up here with your shoulder seam. And you can go ahead and pin in that area. Just like that. Okay. You want to add another little pin here. If some of your layers seem to be getting a little off, you can go ahead and add another pin just to hold them in place. That is what I do to make sure that everything really stays even when I'm sewing. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for this side. Kind of stretching a little bit as we go, just to make sure there are no sagging or bunches or anything going on. Okay, now you are going to end this on the other side of where that underarm seam is. Okay, now we're going to take this to the machine and I will show you how to really put this together because you have a little bit of a different lineup going on right here than you do all the way around the other side. So let's go to the machine. Okay, so this is a little bit different because you are going to use your marking when you did your side arm seam. You're going to use that top marking to begin with, and then you're going to use the other side with the same top marking on the other side. You're going to use that same marking to end this with. So it's a little bit different than the way you would normally do an armhole. You would normally just start at the seam and then go around and start. But this actually has a starting and a stopping point. And it does actually catch both sides. So you don't have to worry about there being a hole there. So at that marking, what I do, first of all, I want to make sure that my seams are lined up. Okay, and they are. So now I'm going to flip this up just like that to make sure all layers are even. But I'm going to start at my marking point right there. So I'm going to lift up my presser foot a bit, put that under there. Make sure you are at 5/8 of an inch. That is where we are going to be sewing. Bring that presser foot down. If you need to check it again, check it. And then go ahead and start sewing. I do at this point backstitch at the beginning and the end just to make sure it's secure. take that last pin out, and you want to flip this over so that you can see your last marking there. Make sure you are not catching the other side of your sleeve underneath when you are sewing. Always stopping and making sure that everything is out of the way underneath and you're only sewing what you need to. So here is my marking right here, and that is where I am going to stop. Go there. I'm at my marking. I'm going to back stitch. And we are done with that. Now, according to the instructions, if you are following the instructions, the same as the collar, if you do not have a serger or you don't want to use your serger to finish it, what you do want to do is secure this armhole. And you want to take and sew another stitching line 1/4 inch away from this inch, okay, towards the raw edge, just the same as the collar when you did that. I'm going to use my serger to finish this raw edge off, just like I did the collar and just like I did the other sleeve band and armhole. So you finish it whatever way you want to finish that, and then what you're going to do is take your seam line and you're going to press it towards your garment, and that's how you're going to finish your sleeve band and your armhole. And then we will move on to the last step, which is hemming. Okay, so now that you have gotten both sleeves attached, at least you should have at this point, be sure to check it if you all haven't already to make sure there is no bunching in your seam lines on your sleeve. If there is, you'll need to go and probably pop that stitch and make sure that you restitch it. Make sure everything is flat so that it looks. Okay, so we are going to, with the shirt wrong side out, we are going to set our machine. I have already set mine to the longest stitch, and then we are going to sew this all the way across at 1/4 inch stitching, okay? Now, I know this may be a little hard to see because I did use the same color thread because this is a garment that I'm actually going to wear. So I apologize for not using a different color thread. But if you can see, I'm going to get it up close here, my stitching line there. I basted my my hem down there at 1/4 inch. Now I'm not going to show this on camera, but I am going to go over to my ironing board. You can use your seam gauge or whatever you use to measure your seam. I'm going to fold this up at 5/8 inch, okay? I'm going to press it, okay? I love to press my hems as I go. I'm going to fold this up, press, and then I am going to use this stitching line as my guide, and I am going to fold that in at that stitching line. And then I'm going to press that down. And then I'm going to stitch close to the edge of that hem line where I folded that raw edge in, okay? And that is how I'm going to finish this bottom edge of my hem. So I'm doing the same thing to both sides. Make sure you do the same thing to both sides, and then we will come back and we will finish our opening. Okay, so now that we have finished our hem, securing it with either a pin or a clip like I have, now we are going to sew our bottom hem. And basically what you are going to do is you are going to stitch along this upper edge here that you folded under. So you're going to stitch close to that edge. Don't forget to put your stitching settings back to normal. Remember, the last stitch that we did was a basting stitch. So if you have not, be sure to adjust your stitching and go ahead and sew your hem starting from this edge all the way to the other edge. No need to back stitch because these edges are going to be folded in when we finish up with our opening. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that first clip, and we're going to go ahead and sew this hem. Okay, so we have finished our hem. The very last step that we're going to do, if you're excited like me, we're almost done. So you already, this is your opening at your hem. Okay, this is the side opening. So you already kind of have a guide here where you stitch your side seam together at the beginning. So this already measures to 5/8 of an inch. So if you take and you fold make sure that your side, the opening here is folded evenly with here. You can even press it if you need to, but just make sure that it's even because you're going to do a 5/8 of an inch narrow hem, kind of like the same thing that you did for the hem itself. So I always like to take and just to make a narrow hem, just fold that raw edge in on itself. And this doesn't take a lot, you guys, because it's a very quick stitch that we're going to do to finish off this opening. And you're going to clip or pin this in place. All right. So we have our narrow hem going there. I'm going to clip that in place right there. Or like I said, you can pin. Sometimes pinning is better depending on the type of knit you're working with. So I got that clipped in place. So that's going to secure my narrow hem. And then I'm going to go up here and I want to put another clip up here. Now you can use as many clips or as many pins as you need to. And I'm going to clip that in place there. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. And what's going to happen is there was a dot there. It's actually on the other side from where we sewed these together. So where this opening is here, you can take where the stitching starts on your side seam. You can take and put a little dot there if you need a guide. But what we're going to do is we're going to stitch starting from the bottom. And you can start from either side that you want. We're going to start from the bottom. We're going to do a stitch all the way up here, a little bit past that opening or above the dot that you've placed there, or your imaginary dot there. You're going to pivot, stitch across, pivot again, and go back down the other side and back stitch. So that is what we are going to do to finish this off. We're going to do it to both sides. So I'm going to do my other narrow hem on this opening. I'm going to go ahead and do it on the other side, and then we are going to stitch this and finish off this top. Okay, so just the same as the hem, we are going to stitch close to the edge that we folded in. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this clip, and because the end of this is a little thicker, I'm going to pull my strings, I'm sorry, not my strings, but my thread in the back when I get this started to help go ahead and pull it on through. So I'm going to get my needle in there to secure it. I'm going to take my thread in the back and I'm going to start very slow so that this doesn't try to lock up within itself. And this is where it's great to have a walking foot, because that walking foot will go ahead and help to pull that through. But even then, sometimes pulling that thread in the back to secure it helps a lot. Now, I am going to keep going. If you want to back stitch at some point, I am going to do a couple of, maybe 3 back stitches here, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew. Making sure my narrow hem stays even, and making sure that I am sewing close to the edge. Take your time, you guys. You don't have to rush through this, especially if you are a beginner. Just take your time and sew. Enjoy the process. Removing my last clip. And we are coming close to that opening, or should I say where we started our side seam stitch or ended it. So we're coming close to there, and we're getting ready to pivot. So keep your eye on that. Once we get past there with our needle, or unless you have your dot there, once we get a little bit past there, which we are, if you have to lift up your presser foot to see, that's fine. Just make sure your needle stays in. You're going to lift up that presser foot. You're going to pivot. Turn this all the way to the side. Straighten it out. Put your presser foot back down. Stitch all the way across until you get to your folded edge. Okay, I'm at my edge here, so I think I went a little too far, so let's back stitch a little bit. All right, so now we're going to lift that presser foot back up. We're going to pivot around again, and we are going to go down the other side. All right, remove that clip and sew. Don't forget the end of this is a little thicker. And you can hear it change a little bit. You may need to take and pull just a little bit. Back stitch a couple of times and finish it off. After you cut your threads, do the same exact thing to the other side. Give your hem and your openings a good press, and you are finished with your top.